and detention centres everywhere. Every Monday at 4 p.m. on your community radio 3CR.
We are still fired up, and we're still talking about revolution.
Hello and welcome to the Doing Time Show. This is 3CR Community Radio, 855 AM on the dial, streaming live on www.3cr.org.au. This is Marisa and I'll be taking you through until 5 o'clock this evening. We've got a pretty action-packed show and this is a special broadcast dedicated to Grandmothers Against Removal, who will be our feature interview on the show. So first up, we're going to be speaking with Aunty Joanne and also her niece Coutney, and they are two of the founders of Grandmothers Against Removal. We'll be speaking to them very shortly about the fact that 20 years after the Bring Them Home report, which revealed widespread devastation caused by large-scale removal of Indigenous children from their families, and after the apology of the Rudd government, there still appears to be no change at all. And I was actually speaking to Aunty on air yesterday, and they're going to speak about the child protection system and some of the flaws and how the system is broken, and having a look at stolen generation, and perhaps even I'm hoping that they'll talk about the demands of Grandmothers Against Removal. So I'm quite excited about that. And then later on, we're going to be speaking with Maud Clark, who helped initiate a theatre company called Somebody's Daughter, who works, and this particular company works with women in prison and post-release as well, and looking at different types of art forms, and also having a look at a video and a video clip that women in prison have done, and it's called No More Hiding in Silence. So we'll talk about that. And then we're going to be talking to Lucy Honan, from the Refugee Action Collective, and we're going to be speaking about an event coming up at MITA Detention Centre, exposing the plight of asylum seekers and refugees. And this particular event is called Untold Storytime, Reading for Refugee Rights at MITA. So we'll talk about that. That's hosted by teachers of refugees. But in the meantime, I'm now going to hopefully line up Coutney and Joanne, and we'll be doing that very soon. Hello, ladies. Welcome to the program.
Hello. Thank you. Hello. How you going?
Good. So that Joanne and Coutney, both of you are there.
Yep. Yes.
Well, that's a very clever piece of conferencing.
We're in place. We're in a technological age now.
Good on your sisters. Now, I'm wondering if you could start off, and it'll be up to you to see who goes first, to talk about Grandmothers Against Removal and what's been going on, and talk about some of the background.
Yeah, okay. We're actually Grandmothers Against Forced Removal South Australia.
Thank you.
So we're a little bit different to the national movement with GMAR.
Okay.
Follow the same principles, but are not necessarily associated with. How it came about for Coutney and myself is that Courtney's grandson was removed at 5 months of age, prematurely and illegally, and it then took us 10 months to fight the system. And I'm actually a worker inside the system, so I'm really familiar with it. But it was 9 placements, 2 lots of abuse before we could get that child back into family care. Meanwhile, 2 of us held DCSI child safe clearances. So there's a lot of problems here in South Australia with the system. Many children have been removed that don't need to be removed. And I think for us, one of the things that, we're just not communicating properly is that every taxpayer out there should be involved in child protection, because it's where the greatest amount of their tax dollars are going, and there's no need for them to go there. To put an intervention in for a family will cost $50 a day. To remove a child is $1,000 a night. So when you look at what we're spending on child protection, a lot better could be done. And that's apart from the effects upon the child, which then all of the family are triggered with intergenerational traumas.
That must have been...
So that's how we got involved.
Very devastating. So Before we actually launch into it, because one of the things that's really important here, I mean, I know that all children are vulnerable in the child protection system, but I think that Aboriginal children have very special circumstances. Could you... Sorry? Go on.
Yep, you're quite correct.
That's true, isn't it? But before we launch into it, could you two just tell us what land you're from, just so that people know?
Certainly. I'm Nuttingere.
Hello, I'm Courtney. So my name's Courtney, Naliandu, Nanawimichi. I'm from the Hunter family, and I'm a Nuttingere and Paramount woman and a grandmother. I have 5 children and 1 grandchild. And Ashton, my grandson, he was removed and placed into care. And my mother, Mandy Brown, she was also part of the stolen generation. She was removed under allegations of, that my grandmother was abusing her as a baby. Now, I have my grandmother's and my mother's files, and it was, that was forced adoption, basically, what happened to my mother. And the allegations is that my grandmother was beating my mother, when it actually turns out, that was pigmentation in my mother's skin. So, for multiple generations now, we've actually been targets of the numerous legal and policy frameworks that are supposed to protect Aboriginal children, but are just, failing us.
So instead of actually working out a kinship structure and looking at placing children with Aboriginal families and looking at things early to help people, what are they doing?
Okay, well, the problem lays in how the legislation is interpreted, and that includes by the South Australian courts, the Youth Court. The Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander child placement principle sits inside legislation, state and federal. The trouble is, although it sits there, and it sits there for a primary reason, beyond the bringing them home report, is the least acknowledged piece within the legislation. The other problem being that here in South Australia anyway, our civil section of the Youth Court who removed the children, it's done on a balance of probability, so there doesn't actually need to be any evidence of what's being alleged. It simply needs to be alleged.
So there's no evidence at all? No, nothing?
Oh, look, in some cases I will say there is evidence, but on the greater majority of cases, there isn't a lot of evidence.
It doesn't operate like a criminal court.
Yeah, no, you don't. It's the only court where it's balance of probability versus evidence. At one stage I worked for the Aboriginal Family Support Services, which is our gazetted agency here, and responded to all court reports. Again, we get back to the fact that we're asked for cultural safety to be put into all court matters, but once it gets there, it's the least acknowledged safety aspect for a child, or for an Aboriginal child anyway.
So there really needs to be no further adoption of Indigenous children.
Absolutely. More than that, what we fight for here in South Australia is that all removals, given the time, usually unless it's an emergency removal, there is enough time to identify family members who could keep the children safe inside family. This is what we're promoting here in South Australia through Family Matters, the Family Matters campaign under Snake. We understand that sometimes environments aren't going to be really productive for a child to grow up to be happy and healthy, but at the same time, taking them completely out of family, severing culture, severing everything that they understand about being Aboriginal and putting them into a non-Aboriginal household and world, leads to life outcomes that are so poor that it starts to take shape in the problems that we see now, which is the alcoholism, the mental health, the prison rates, all of the, social consequences that are attached to child removal. And that's not just, it is critical for Aboriginal children because our cultural connections are critical, but that's critical for all children. We sometimes see, like we did on Mother's Day a couple of years ago, a non-Aboriginal man looking for his birth mother simply because he just wanted to know who he was. Well, that's no different for Aboriginal children, but it's more critical because during their youth and during their, as young people, they're going through customs and things like that around their identity that just can't be done later in life. So if you take a child at a young age and bring the child back at 18, especially into remote communities, what we've found from the families is that the families don't know how to relate with the child and the child doesn't know how to relate with the culture. So, again, we end up with social consequences of unemployment, jail, all of the things that you just don't want to see in a country like this one.
Indeed, and it's actually really good to have South Australia represented on the Doing Time show, because we haven't done a lot of South Australia. It's all been New South Wales. And what's your country called, though, again, in South Australia, your bit?
Nudingerry. We're both Nudingerry women.
Nudingerry.
We're on Ghana country.
We're on Ghana country at the moment. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. And do you think perhaps, what do both of you think of this, that maybe, Courtney, if you were comfortable, that you could talk about what happened, and of course we don't want to open up old wounds, but I think it's important that listeners do know why they should have done something more to help you with your child, and rather than taking him away. Can you use that perhaps as an example to highlight some of the stolen generation stuff? Do you feel comfortable with that, Courtney?
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah,
Awesome.
I'm actually now, because of this, I'm a second-year law student, and I think that sometimes you have to separate emotions from, the facts
For sure.
of what actually happened. And at the time that it occurred, I was extremely traumatised. It had taken me around 30 years to process my grandmother's pain, that was passed down through my mother to me. And my family has always lived with that fear, of forced removals, as do nearly all families, because us as Aboriginal people, this impacts our lives like every single day, and I'm just speaking for my family, but I know that there's families out there, people now are too scared to send their children to school, they're running from the state, and that is just, not acceptable that they're in such fear, living in their own country. But with my grandson, basically he was taken under risk of emotional neglect. Now, my son and my daughter-in-law had been at my home, that day. We have an extensive family, so they had a lot of support.
I'm just going to cut in and explain on behalf of Courtney that in Aboriginal families, unlike in non-Aboriginal families, we don't have single-parent attachment, which is what makes the law complex, because for us, under law, everything is focused on the parents.
Yeah.
However, like 95% of the world's population, we use an allo-parenting system, which means that the parents weren't the only carers. There was Courtney, myself, Courtney's mother, whose other auntie, who's a retired GP. There were plenty of people inside the family that could have taken care of him.
Yeah, I get it.
To continue is that, my grandson was taken under risk of emotional neglect. Now, at the time, on the phone we were told basically that it was co-sleeping and toys in the cot was the reasons for removal.
Oh.
There was, I know, which, co-sleeping is one of our practices. Like, we sleep with our children in the bed like that.
Come on. Are you serious?
I'm serious. We're serious. Yep.
Oh.
And we have not one of the worst cases we've come across.
My grandson, we wanted him to be placed with mum, and it turned out, they had put an affidavit in saying that because my mum was stolen gen, she was emotionally incapable of caring for her grandson. That was then later discarded, which these workers, are straight out of university. They've got no idea of our cultural practices, how we operate as families.
And no accountability.
And there's zero accountability, zero. So my grandson was moved multiple times. He was abused. One of the carers was on ice. My grandson went missing.
Oh, great.
We're talking about a 5-month-old baby.
This is a baby.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised with the child protection system, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's
disgusting.
It's named wrongly. It should not be called a child protection system and hasn't protected children in the longest time. If you look at any research from anywhere around the country, you will see the outcomes for children exiting the system are the lowest in this country. So therefore, in essence, what we were doing by putting them into the system,
placing them at risk,
is and eroding their lifelong outcome.
So it's
I think
basically,
we need to look to New Zealand.
For sure. Oh, yeah, New Zealand, absolutely, because they're a pretty good example.
Policy.
Yeah.
Courtney and I often discuss different policies internationally, and the thing that stands out to us the most is when you read our reports here, such as Nyland's Life They Deserve, or the current, A Fresh Start that we're having the reform under, compare the language in that to the language in the New Zealand, think family life chances and things like that. Their governments take accountability for the vulnerability of their people. our governments take a punitive approach and tend to punish those that are slipping through the gaps.
It's very interesting to see, I think. Would it be fair to say that this is really about a modern day penal colony and mission system?
Funny enough, we often refer to it as a colonialist approach. The timelines, we're sitting here with timelines that run from 1770 to 2016, and what we've highlighted is the repeated approach of the same assimilation, which is now called mainstreaming, and the forced removal of children into other cultures. Now, legally, when you look at the transfer of a large number of children from one culture to another, it's classed as genocide.
It's 1788 all over again, and one of the things is, isn't it really? I mean, if you really look at it, I mean, look at what happened with Naomi Williams, the young woman who died as a result of negligence on the part of the health authorities at the hospital in New South Wales, the Aboriginal woman who was pregnant.
We've actually got children killing themselves here inside the system rather than remain inside the system. When it gets to that point, and when a system knows it's broken, and in South Australia we've had 4 inquiries into our child protection system, only the last one by Justice Nyland was acted upon. However, that system isn't repaired. It's not even close to repaired, and they are still taking, at the moment, I think last year was 1,215 Aboriginal kids put into care, but that's not the juvenile justice system. And it's interesting, we were just listening coming into our turn to talk about the prison system. One of the largest problems we've got here in South Australia is it's undermined by poverty, such as Aboriginal mothers, parking tickets, speeding fines, anything like that that can't be paid, then cancels the licence, then it becomes a jailable offence. The moment the mothers are in jail, the children are in the system, and again, we won't get them back out.
Well, that's exactly right. And one of the things that I keep talking about over and over again on this show in particular is that stolen generation has not disappeared, because what's happening is that all the descendants of the perpetrators that perpetrated all those crimes of humanity against Aboriginal children are here in this country. I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound awful, but
it's reality. This is the truth.
It's reality, and they're still perpetuating those things without being educated.
And that's it. And this is why Courtney and I have decided to take the approach where if government is selling our kids on a business plan, we want taxpayers to look at what they're paying for, which is, worse outcomes. And it can only mean that you're going to pay more tax next year because the cycles are ascending. They're increasing. They are not decreasing. But, money aside, what sort of communities are we going to have, or what sort of society are we going to have here in a little while when everybody's been broken down and put inside systems, nobody knows who they are, we've got mental health, drug abuse. It's a real mess.
Indeed. No, it is a mess. And, this is where it all comes back to treaty, and part of treaty needs to be a way to move forward to help each other. I mean, come on, this co-sleeping thing and saying that someone's not emotionally capable because they're from stolen generation, I mean, those are really, really subjective allegations, aren't they?
Well, this is where I think the system deliberately targets certain family groups, and they've done it systemically for generations now. Like, you can't deny the evidence base that actually exists. That every single family is impacted in this way. Like, the state just keeps coming and coming and coming, and my mother had submitted to, the Bringing Them Home report, some of her poetry's in there about the impact upon her being removed, and, that was in 1997, and now we fast forward nearly 2 decades later, and it's gone from 1 in every 5 children living in out-of-home care to today, and that's now every 1 in 3 Aboriginal children are in care. And, in the legislation, the child protection legislation, it talks about the Aboriginal child placement principles. Well, in the majority of cases, you could actually say that those are not even applied.
Correct. And I think something too for your listeners, because Courtney and I, being Aboriginal, have a different understanding. to look at the timelines for Aboriginal families. Like I said, we're sitting with timelines that run from 1770 to 2016, where there has been a major impact at least every 3 years. You know, that's a collective trauma. And some of the signs of collective trauma are deep mistrust of self and others, fear of anticipated betrayal, shame, humiliation, loss of value, violence, suicide, risk-taking, substance abuse, unlimited grief. These are all things that were forced upon us, and now we're being punished for them again because that's what they used to remove the children.
Cultural genocide.
Indeed, it's cultural genocide. So what's...
It's basically racism.
That's exactly right. It is racism. So what can you do as a group to try and change that?
Okay, we've been working really hard at this.
We'll be here all night.
We're about to start protest rallies because what we found in the last 2 years is under this current South Australian reform, the reform's been set. It benefits the government. The government has created huge industries from the reform money. And there are no better outcomes for people. There is no genuine place. You know, we speak with lawyers, we speak with everyone, and what they tell us is the same thing we experience. By the time we get to a family and they tell us their story, they have never had an opportunity to even answer sometimes to some of the things that their children are being removed for. And language is another thing. I've worked in positions where, you know, we've had 60 clinicians on board and we had to sit with most of them because a non-Aboriginal interpretation of what an Aboriginal person is saying usually gets mixed up. It's a little bit like Chinese whispers.
Yeah. It's really hard, and I think that this discussion is really, really crucial, isn't it? And I'd like to have you two back regularly, you know, to talk about what's happening because it's really important.
We'd love to. Yeah. We'd love to bring our friends too, like Chris Graham.
Oh, yeah. Chris Graham's awesome.
I love him. He exposed John Howard's Northern Territory intervention. He's a very interesting man to talk
yes. To. Yeah, maybe we can tee that up next. We can all do a conference. We'll do a panel.
Oh, let's do a panel. That'd be great. Yeah, we've got Paul and Stanford and plenty who will speak.
We can have an Aboriginal drum.
Oh, let's do it. Let's do it.
We will soon. It's all good. Not that we're copying ABC, but we'll think of another name. Look, I really thank you so much for coming onto the program. I'm going to be having another interview happening in 3 minutes, but I wanted to give you nearly half the show because I just felt that stolen generation is a really important topic, and keep up the good work, and let's hope we can do some work together.
Actually, Courtney and I spoke about it. We'd like to end our show by quoting Uncle Charlie Perkins, and that is to say that Aboriginal people don't live in the past continues to live with us. So next time before someone asks why don't we get over it, it's because we can't.
Yep. Are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, the past continues to live with us. And Courtney, you have got the most amazing voice for court.
Oh, thanks.
I hope to make a good lawyer one day.
Doesn't she, Joanne?
Actually, no, I just said to Courtney I've got the perfect face for radio.
What I was seeing, is when we were going into, the child protection system is that a lot of these young ones don't understand at every point of contact the department is actually taking evidence against them.
That's right.
They think that they're their friends and, they tell them everything and they have no legal representation half the time. Sometimes they're told the cases lack merit. And that in itself is actually a miscarriage of justice. And the fact that the child protection system and its workers are using perjury in the court, to secure these outcomes, that in itself, just is testimony to what we're actually up against, and it's just, it's a huge battle, but it's a battle that we're willing to take on, and keep fighting.
Absolutely. And how old is Tyson now?
How old is Ashton?
Aston, sorry. How old is Aston?
Ashton, he's 3, and he's doing really well. For a while there, he thinks when he goes to a new home or he sees DCP standard issue furniture, he's traumatised by that. What he experienced, he was a happy, healthy baby when he was taken, which was verified by medical professionals. They tried to say that he had failure to thrive. They didn't get, there was no medical failure to thrive, and in the end they put failure to strive. And we're like, what, straight out of the cot, you know? Like, you know, he's only 5 months old. Like, what happened to my grandmothers and my mother is absolutely disgusting.
I think it'll be a good session to come back and talk about the differences between removing children who are placed at risk and having children inside the system with failure to thrive all over their files, and the department ignores it. So, we're happy to talk about a lot of things.
Let's talk about that very soon, perhaps in a couple of weeks' time, in a month's time, you come back on.
No worries.
Failure to thrive. I mean, maybe they need to say failure to assimilate.
Yeah. That's a new catchphrase. That is, because it is failure to assimilate, you know, because those children, my grandson, he cried for us, you know, and every time we'd see him, you know, I'd show him the trees and I'd be like, you know, I'd explain to him, you know, the trees, and, you know, he'd talk to them, he'd look at us, he'd get upset every time he'd drive off in that car, you know, and it just, every single moment, you know, it was just heartbreaking to not know where he was. He was then bashed and he was in hospital. You know, we weren't allowed to go to the baby, you know, even though we'd actually done nothing wrong to him. There was no criminal charges. There was nothing in place to say that we couldn't go to our grandson, bar those workers. So one of them told me that she was adopted and she turned out fine. And like we said, the difference between you is that, you know, you were given up. And I said, you stole that baby. You know, and her face was just like, well, what can I say to that? Because they did steal the baby and they're still stealing our kids, and they need to stop.
Accountability for that, though, sits with the government and the minister, because what we find is those little grabs know that they can hide behind the statutory authority without any accountability. And that was our complaint, was that false affidavits had been knowingly provided to the court to remove the child. That's when we got him back.
Absolutely. And even if there are problems, whether it relate, you know, to all children, give people help early and don't go snatching them, you know?
Yeah, again, exactly. I highly recommend the New Zealand policies. They are amazing.
We'll have to have a look at that.
Getting a boat and floating to New Zealand.
Yeah, seeking asylum from the Australian government. I brought this up, though, the other day. I'm doing refugee law and policy, and I brought it up that, you know, with some of the other students, is that how come no one seeks asylum from Australia? And it's actually getting to the point where,
it's our culture.
You know, it's our culture, but I don't want to run.
It's time to go.
But it's time for us to go, because when it's not safe for me and my family to stay in Australia, where else are we going to go?
You know what? Don't give the government the satisfaction.
No, never.
It'll be all right. Thanks so much for coming onto the program. It was lovely to have you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you.
We'll talk very soon. And I'll let you know the podcast. We'll give you the link when it comes out.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Take care. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye. And that was Aunty Joanne and her niece Coutney from Forced Grandmothers of Removal. I believe there's a couple of groups within Australia, and they were specifically from South Australia. And we're going to be speaking pretty soon with Maud Clark from Somebody's Daughter shortly, from a theatre company that works with and acts with women in prison and post-release.
Red alert. Numbers are needed at the Djab Wurrung Heritage Protection Embassy camps immediately. Sacred birthing trees on Djab Wurrung country need protecting. Over 50 generations have been born on these sites, and the birthing trees themselves are 800 years old. These trees are being protected from the Victorian Labor Party's planned highway extension that is set to destroy this sacred dreaming landscape. The cops are coming with eviction orders very soon. The campaign to protect country is led by Djab Wurrung traditional owners who are calling on people from all walks of life for support. You can help by joining traditional owners at the camp on Djab Wurrung country near Ararat, or by donating and putting pressure on Daniel Andrews to protect this sacred land. Visit dwembassy.com for more information and updates. No trees, no treaty.
And welcome to the Doing Time show. No trees, no treaty indeed. And we're going to be speaking now with Maud Clark from Somebody's Daughter. Hello, Maud. Welcome to the program.
Hello.
It's lovely to have you. And this is the very first time you're coming on, and I want to welcome you to the show.
Oh, that's very lovely. Thank you.
Now, perhaps you can guide me through it and just talk a little bit about Somebody's Daughter and also about the video clip. So I'll leave you over to you.
Okay, look, Somebody's Daughter Theatre has been working in the prison since 1980, when we took a show into Fairlea Women's Prison, and one of the women asked if we could do drama. And since that time, with a few little breaks, but not that many, there has been a show that has been devised by the women, performed by the women every year, and with an art exhibition. The art exhibition started when Sally Marsden started coming in the late 80s. So there's an art exhibition and a show that happens now at Deer Park every year. And at Tarrangower Prison, Kate, visual artist who works with Somebody's Daughter, there's probably 4 or 5 a year that happen in the visit centre up there. So since 1980, Somebody's Daughter Theatre has been working with women in the prison and post-release. And also we have been working with young people in partnership with Education Health, led by the arts, for young people who can't do mainstream school mainly, and the arts become the bridge back into education and inclusion.
Wow, I mean that's fantastic. I mean, because I've heard of how did the title of Somebody's Daughter, how was it born?
It was born with a group of us around the table, and I think I suggested it because everybody is somebody's daughter, and that was when we'd been doing shows in it fairly up until the 80s, late 80s, and then a woman who got out had found so much support from the work, the creative work in the prison, that she wanted the same on the outside. And so once we started forming a group on the outside, we needed to name ourselves and all of that stuff. And that show was called Tell Her That I Love Her. I think it was in 1991, I'm not sure. Yeah. And that's when we officially formed as a theatre company, and that's when the name Somebody's Daughter Theatre. And it's confusing. Excuse me, because we work with a number of young men as well as young women now, people centred, Yep. But we think we should be calling ourselves somebody else's grandmother by now.
No, but that's good. I mean, we're still daughters, even if we're older.
Totally. Absolutely, totally.
And we're all ageless, really. But, Maud, one of the things that I was looking at today, I actually managed to see the video, No More Hiding in Silence.
Fantastic.
And it was such a powerful clip, and it really highlighted to me as a radio broadcaster and also as a woman, being that domestic violence has to be acknowledged. And imagine women in prison being afraid for their loved ones on the outside. Can you talk about that clip? And because I want to see if we can promote it for listeners.
I love your work. So this was we had some funding from the Victorian Women's Trust and with Anna Myler, Portland and Australia Council, who are an ongoing funder, and with great support from Justice, we were able to bring a scene and a song that was from a show that was done in the prison 2 years ago. Always, most of the women, as you would well know and all of your listeners would know, most women within the prison system are there and they have huge issues of violence. It's a no-brainer why people end up there, really. And that violence is often perpetuated through systems. So, and it's very hard. It's been very hard to find a way to bring the voice of women inside in terms of getting through all the processes. And also, we've always been really aware that women might say that they want to have their faces shown while they're in prison, and once they're out, they don't really want that. So it was very important that this project was handled in a way where there was great respect for the women as well. And Karen Harper really spearheaded this. She's the main she's the artistic director who works with Justin Holland, Karen Taylor and Sam Reed within the prison. So we were able to manage to work with a group of post-release women who were green screened so it looked like they were in the prison, in the cells, with women in the prison who were able to do this beautiful circle up, and it brings tears to my eyes every time I see it. Yeah. That was a huge thing for that to be filmed on the Oval in the prison. And also with young people that we've worked with outside in Albury, Wodonga and Geelong. So it was an incredible bringing together of communities who know the violence inside out. And it was a wonderful opportunity for women within the prison to be able to put their voice and get their voice out there to join with everyone around the world for No More Hiding in Silence. So it's on the website. If anybody wants to see it, you just go to Somebody's Daughter Theatre website and it's up there front and centre.
So what's the actual name of the website?
It's Somebody's Daughter Theatre. I looked it up myself, www. somebody's daughter theatre, and that will take you to the website.
Look, it really is worth watching and listening to. And in fact, I believe there's a donation button there too, isn't there?
You're fantastic. That was your work. Yes, there is.
Tell us about why people need to press the button.
Oh, look, we're a small community theatre company, and we believe that the arts are important for soul, spirit, everything, and particularly, and I would say particularly for so many of the oppressed communities we work with, they don't have that privilege. So what the arts can do there's a whole thing in Native American tradition where they talk about soul retrieval.
Yes.
And, a shaman can bring your soul back, travel between the worlds and bring your soul back. And that's what the arts do, through song and dance and theatre and people coming together in circle, they reclaim parts of themselves. And that's what we do when we have a fantastic, I reckon, a fantastic, where you're totally engaged on a heart and soul level, you're bringing all of your bits together. So so the work we do, and we claim we're very much a company of artists. We have strong partnerships with health, with education and with justice, but we are a company of artists. And the arts are often hard for people to get. They don't understand it in the same way that it is in terms of housing, and I understand that too. But so it's a constant battle, and for us as a community arts organisation to survive over 30 years is a miracle, nothing short of a miracle, and it's hard. So, and I do know for the women within the prison that work with us, the prison walls dissolve and there's a time where they can just be a human being meeting another human being, and that point is immeasurably powerful. The work that we do on the outside with young people, there are young people that are treading paths now that have not taken them into the prison system. And I know that that's because of their work with us. So the work on the outside is very, very, very much about using the arts as a platform or a bridge to education. And there's quite a few young people now who just have established lives that would never, ever, ever have been possible. So I don't know if that's
that's amazing. Thank you very much. And in fact, just so that listeners are aware, this is a theatre company. In case people have just tuned in, this is the Doing Time show, and we're listening to an interview with Maud Clark. And this theatre company is for and of women in prison and post-release, isn't it? That's how it started. Yes. It started from Fairlea, didn't it?
It started at Fairlea, and the post-release, we're wanting to build the post-release, and of course it's all to do with funding. Yeah. So we're hoping to reinvigorate that whole arm. It was very, very, very strong in the 90s, and there were some fantastic shows. Some people might remember Tell Her That I Love Her and Call My Name. And then there was the Gatwick that was at Chapel of Chapel not that long ago, and So Full of Brave at the Arts Centre. So there's been some amazing, amazing shows that have come from post-release. But in terms of funding...
Yeah, that's hard.
That's going to take... And it also, we don't believe in hit-and-run projects where, as you can see, being in a prison, we've been there for 30 years. It's really important that it's not yet another case of where people have a form of connection and then that connection falls down a hole. So we're really aware of the importance of strong connections with health, with education, drug courts doing fantastic things. So hopefully within the next 12 months or so, that whole space will be much stronger than it is now.
And to get the government on side as well, which is sometimes difficult.
We have really good connections with people in justice.
Good.
And I can't commend the manager of the prison enough. She has been fantastic.
At Dame Phyllis Frost?
Yep.
Fantastic. Oh, well, good.
Tracy Jones has been absolutely wonderful.
We've got to hear the positive as well. And in fact, Maud, one of the things is that this show actually started many years ago now, I'd say more than 20 years ago, and there are, a lot of ex-prisoners that would come in, and sometimes there still are, and, the collective varies, but why we still broadcast the show is because we still believe that there is a listenership in prison. Obviously, we don't have the money to do surveys to work out how many people are listening, but that's why we do it. We offer it as a resource for men and women in prison to listen to the show. So, are there any?
I want to be very
Go
I
on.
want to be very clear. I don't believe in prisons.
I don't either.
Absolutely do not. And
No.
I've been on the record for that for a number of years. And I believe that if, as a society, we really did have a commitment to our most disadvantaged and oppressed, we would have a much more visionary system. Not even a system. It's based on a punishment model.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't work for people who've been punished from the moment they've been born. So I think that there's fantastic people that we have had the fortune to have as supporters within the justice system, and that's part of the reason that we're still existing. And having said that, I do not believe in prisons at all.
Absolutely. And in fact, I believe Vicky Roach is in Somebody's Daughter, and she does a lot of work on prison abolition.
Oh, she's fantastic. She's in the clip. She's fantastic.
She's amazing.
She's one of the post-release, and her input was absolutely wonderful. And in fact, I saw her on the drum weeks before we did it, and I thought that ABC, I shouldn't say that on 3CR, should I?
That's all right.
But that particular episode talking about
There's nothing wrong with that.
Women in prison and the lack of need for prisons was absolutely fantastic.
Look, it's good. The drum does have some great things. I was just talking about the drum before your interview, actually.
Yeah.
No, but it's true. There's nothing wrong with highlighting other programs. We do it all the time.
Sammy J's piece on Thursday night made me weep. The song made me weep.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And are there any tours coming up at all?
Not for the, in terms of the prison. We're hoping to release another video clip which is based on a gambling, a song around gambling that was done in that same year as that show. There's a prison show that's coming up, but that's very much an invited guest.
Fantastic.
And then, but in early December, we're going to be performing in Geelong, again, the show that's by the young people down there, Unapologetically Myself. And so many of those young people understand these issues inside out and have, contact within their lives of prison.
Wonderful. Look, thank you so much for coming onto the program, Maud. It's been a pleasure, really.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for your perseverance and thank you for bringing people's attention to the video clip.
No,
That's
it's
great.
And I'm sure we'll chat again soon and keep up the beautiful work. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that was Maud Clark from Somebody's Daughter. Now, we're not going to have time for any music because we're going to be having a special third interview now, and we're going to be speaking with Lucy Honan from the Refugee Action Collective, speaking about... And you're back with the Doing Time show. My apologies. There were some technical difficulties there. Hello, Lucy. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Marisa.
Sorry about that.
That's all good.
Yeah. Now, Lucy, I just wanted to reintroduce you. Lucy Honan is from the Refugee Action Collective, but you are representing teachers, is it?
Teachers for Refugees, that's right.
Teachers for Refugees. And you're from both, aren't you?
Exactly.
Fantastic. So, Lucy, I'm wondering if you could talk about this wonderful event that's happening at MITA in Broadmeadows and talk about what MITA is as well and what's going on.
Okay, sure. So this Saturday at 12 noon, Teachers for Refugees is hosting a protest that we're calling Untold Storytime out the front of the MITA Detention Centre in Broadmeadows. MITA is it holds a few hundred refugees in detention who, they're similar to the people in Manus and Nauru. The Australian government has decided that they're not welcome in Australia for a whole variety of reasons, and it's called administrative immigration detention, but it's a prison. And we are protesting the fact that this detention centre exists, but in particular we are highlighting the fact that there are 5 children in that detention centre, including one little girl who was born there. People may have heard of the Billa Wheeler family, the 2 little girls who were born in Queensland, and then Peter Dutton's border force ripped them out of their home in the middle of the night with their parents and brought them across the country, and they've been held in Broadmeadows Detention Centre ever since, awaiting their deportation to Sri Lanka, as well as lots of other people, including there are 4 men in Broadmeadows, Tamil men, who have spent nearly 10 years in indefinite detention in Australia's detention centres. So we are holding a Teachers for Refugees protest we're going to have what we're calling the Untold Storytime, so a storytime protest. The kids in detention don't get story time. A lot of the efforts to get early childhood education and, lots of contact with early childhood educators and playgroups and so on for those kids and their parents have been frustrated by Serco, the company who runs the detention centre. So we're holding a story time at the front to make the general public aware of the fact that that detention centre exists and what it's doing to people, and also to show solidarity with all those people inside. So we'll have speakers and there'll be lots of opportunities for kids and other people to get involved, sign making, cake stalls, origami, freedom bird making, book readings and more. So that's the plan for this Saturday at 12 noon outside the detention centre in Broadmeadows.
So it's on the 10th of August, and as you said, it's just to talk about it again, in case people have just tuned in, Untold Storytime reading for Refugee Rights. That's going to be outside the detention centre. And so it's the 10th of August, isn't it, at 12 o'clock, and it finishes at 1:30 p.m.
That's right.
And the address is 120 to 150 Camp Road, Broadmeadows. 3047. Do leave a bit earlier, especially if you're getting a taxi. I used to get a taxi to the centre and the taxi driver could never find it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a, because it's an old military barrack. So if you're driving up Camp Road, drive up slowly. We'll have lots of banners and things out the front, so hopefully you can see us.
So Teachers for Refugees, now when you say Untold Storytime protest, does that mean that you'll be doing talks as well?
That's right. So we're going to have lots of speakers. There'll be somebody from the Tamil Refugee Council speaking, teachers talking, as well as we've got somebody who's creating a storybook of what's happening inside the Broadmeadows Detention Centre. I'll be reading that. Librarians for Refugees are going to be providing a book display as well to provide lots of different books and show people the kind of books that are available if they're teachers or their parents and so on, and they want to educate young people about what's going on in the way that they can understand it clearly, and also educate people about the history and the power of protest movements that have stood up to our government over injustices like this. And we're also really happy June Factor, who she's the author of the Far Out Brussels Sprout series. She's somebody who's heard about what's going on in detention. She's been very, very seriously advocating for kids in detention for a long time. She'll be there and reading from her book and making a gift of her books to the kids. And we're hoping that some of the kids inside the detention centre will be able to hear us, have an audio link, and maybe we'll be able to hear from them too.
That's fantastic. And, that's so important to have true stories of refugees. Not that any of them are false, but you know what I'm trying to say. It's important to have.
Well, they are false from Peter Dutton.
Oh, yes, of course.
He just lies and lies. And so
yeah, he does.
I agree with you. The true stories are the important stories.
And Lucy, there are some really powerful messages that you've all created here. The message to the Morrison government, and I'll just read out a few of those messages for listeners. Kids out, free Kapika, Isabella and others and families, all out of offshore and onshore detention, permanent protection, don't deport to danger. Dutton claims that there are no children in detention but imprisoned in MITA at Broadmeadows alone. A 2-year-old during, how do you pronounce it?
Veronica.
And 3-year-old Kapika. And they were born in Queensland and they faced deportation to Sri Lanka, as you said, along with their parents. And I just wanted to highlight that, Lucy, because it is important that listeners are aware of why you're doing the event and the wonderful work that that teachers are doing and all people in the Refugee Action Collective as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, it's important for teachers. A lot of us have taught kids who have had refugee backgrounds. Sometimes kids who have been in detention, and we can see the impact that detention has on kids and young people or kids whose parents have been in Australia's detention centres. It's such a brutal cruelty and does such deep psychological damage to people, particularly after whatever other trauma they've been through. And so there are plenty of teachers who feel this is a very, very serious cause that we're taking on as our own. And a lot of inspiration is actually coming from teachers in the USA. I'm not sure if your listeners are aware of the movement against kids in cages. Teachers in the USA have been protesting Dutton's concentration camps where kids have been separated at the border and held in those horrific cages.
Oh, yes.
Teachers have been protesting there, and saying classrooms, not cages, get the kids out of detention. And so that's, I suppose part of the inspiration for us is as teachers we have a responsibility when it comes to kids. We are mandatory reporters. We are by law supposed to report any instance where we think that children have been damaged, neglected or abused. And this is a clear instance, but it's the government doing it. So we have to, use our teacher voices, as we say, and shout loudly and clearly, this is an extreme injustice and it needs to end for the kids, but not just the kids. Everyone in those detention centres needs to be released.
Does not Dutton and the Morrison government, doesn't it realise, and doesn't Dutton realise that this is in breach of mandatory reporting?
I don't think they care. I mean, I think on one level they must, because that's part of the secrecy and part of the lies. Dutton keeps saying there's no kids in detention. Morrison makes out now as if it was his idea all along to get all the kids off Nauru. If you remember that campaign last year, Kids Off.
Yes.
During the election campaign, Morrison was kind of posturing as if it was him. He'd done it. Said nothing about all of the advocates and activists and doctors and teachers and so on, all the effort that it took to kind of shame them publicly about what they were doing. So I think they understand that it is not publicly acceptable to keep children in detention. That's why it's secret. Well, they don't care. Personally, they do not care at all about these kids. It's part of the racism of the immigration detention system. But yeah, they definitely don't take that into account as a question of duty of care for teachers or for themselves.
Absolutely, and I was actually talking to Chris Breen last week from the Refugee Action Collective, and we were speaking about the Medivac bill and how the Morrison government wants to repeal that, and that will certainly affect children.
Yeah, it definitely will affect children. I mean, the truth is there's no children on Nauru or Manus anymore, and that's down to the refugee activists and advocates and refugees themselves who have stood up to the government. But there are people who have been separated from their families, so fathers, whose children and wives are living in Australia because they were on a different boat to them, and they've been separated now for 6 years, for example, or their families are in their country of origin or another transit country, and they just have not been able to connect to them. So the Medivac bill, I think a lot of people have been hoping that would be a opportunity to get everybody out of the detention camps, because they're making everybody sick. And if the government does repeal that, then it will affect, it will put a stopper on that process.
Well, I hope not, and let's keep up the good work. So, people need to rock up to Saturday's event on the 10th of August at MITA, starting from 12 o'clock until 1:30, and listen to some of the stories of the refugees and some of the great work that's being done. Lucy, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks, Marisa. Good to talk.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. And that was Lucy Honan, who is representing teachers of refugees. And there's as I said, there's an event happening down at MITA Detention Centre outside, drawing attention to the violation of human rights of asylum seekers and refugees, particularly children. It's approximately 4:55 and we're nearing the end of our show. Thank you very much to our guests for participating. Thanks a lot to Aunty and Aunty Joanne and niece Coutney as well. And also thank you to Maud Clark, and from Somebody's Daughter, and also to Lucy as well. Just a quick reminder before we actually go, because we've got to go soon. Beyond Zero's up next. Just wanted to, friendly reminder, quickly revisit Radiothon. It's not too late to donate. 3CR still needs to meet its target, although we've come a long way. The Doing Time show didn't make its target this year. Almost. We had $850. Thank you to all our people that did donate, but we have $35 that we still need to raise. So anybody that's still wanting to donate, please call 94198377. It's approximately 4:56. We've got about 1 minute before I'm out of here. Tune in every Monday from 4 to 5 for the Doing Time show. Thank you to Rob, who helped produce the show and helped it run smoothly. Thank you also to Peter as well, who helped to organise the interviews. So stay strong and take care of each other. We're going to be going out now with our theme song, Black Fella, White Fella, from the Rumpy Band. And it's goodbye from Marisa. Stay safe.